Something just happened in the middle of the Indian Ocean that most people on this planet have not even registered yet. And by the time they do, the entire shape of the standoff between the United States and Iran may have already shifted into a configuration that nobody, not even Tehran's most senior generals, is prepared to deal with. Not the blockade, not the 3 carrier strike groups, not the 50,000 American troops holding the perimeter around the Strait of Hormuz, not the destroyers, not the submarines, not the Apaches hunting fast attack boats. What happened in the last 72 hours is bigger than all of that combined, because the United States Air Force did not move a fighter jet. They did not move a destroyer. They did not move a carrier. They moved something else entirely, something that only flies at night, something that does not show up on radar, something that has only one job, one specific, terrifying surgical job. And that job is to deliver a 30,000-pound bomb to a target so deeply buried under a mountain in Iran that the Iranians have spent the last 15 years telling themselves it could never, ever be touched. That bomb is called the GBU-57. The aircraft that carries it is the B-2 Spirit, and 5 of them just landed at Diego Garcia. Let that sit for a second. Because we're not talking about another F-35 sortie. We're not talking about another show of force flyby. We're not talking about another press conference at the Pentagon. We are talking about the only aircraft on planet Earth capable of delivering the only weapon on planet Earth that can reach the only target in Iran that actually matters in the long arc of this conflict. And all 3 of those things just synchronized at a tiny atoll in the middle of nowhere, 2,400 nautical miles from the Iranian coast, well inside the operational radius of a stealth bomber, well outside the reach of any Iranian anti-aircraft system, and exactly the distance from Tehran that says everything Washington wants to say without anyone in the White House having to say a single word. This is not a coincidence. This is not a routine exercise. This is not a training rotation. The United States Air Force does not move B-2 Spirits casually. Each one of these aircraft costs $2.1 billion to build. There are only 19 of them left in the entire fleet, after one was destroyed in a crash in 2008. They are based out of Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, and they do not leave Missouri unless something is about to happen. So when 5 of them disappear from Whiteman and reappear at Diego Garcia under the cover of night, the entire intelligence community of every adversary nation on Earth lights up at the same time. And right now, the brightest light in that room is sitting directly over Tehran. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what the United States has already built around Iran over the last several months. And once you see it laid out clearly, the picture stops being about diplomacy and starts being about engineering. The Navy is enforcing a naval blockade of Iranian ports that, by every measurable metric, has been spectacularly effective. 42 commercial vessels intercepted, 41 oil tankers sitting in maritime limbo with approximately 69 million barrels of Iranian crude that cannot be sold, cannot be moved, cannot be monetized. That is roughly $6 billion in revenue surgically removed from the financial bloodstream of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The blockade is being enforced by 3 full-carrier strike groups operating simultaneously in the region, the first time in over a decade that 3 carriers have been concentrated in a single theater. There are over 50,000 American service members involved in the operation. There are over 200 aircraft cycling through combat air patrols. There are Apaches hunting fast attack boats. There are Marine expeditionary units conducting boarding operations. There are Ohio-class guided missile submarines silently shadowing the Iranian coastline carrying 154 Tomahawk land attack missiles apiece. There are RQ-4 Global Hawks maintaining persistent surveillance orbits. There are E-8 J-Stars aircraft tracking every vehicle that moves on the Iranian road network. There are RC-135 rivet joints harvesting every signal that passes between every Iranian radio. This is not pressure. This is suffocation. And on top of that suffocation, the Air Force just added 5 aircraft that changed the entire calculation. Because everything I just described, every destroyer, every fighter, every submarine, every drone, can only hit targets that are above the ground. The B-2 is the one piece of the entire American arsenal that exists specifically to destroy what is underneath the ground. And Iran has spent 20 years burying the only thing they have left worth defending, Diego Garcia. If you have never heard that name, you are about to hear it a lot. It is a horseshoe-shaped coral atoll roughly the size of Manhattan, sitting in the absolute middle of the Indian Ocean. It is jointly operated by the British government and the United States military. It has one runway, a 12,000-foot runway, long enough to launch a fully loaded B-2 in tropical heat. It has hardened bomb storage facilities. It has fuel reserves measured in millions of gallons. It has 0 civilian population. It has no neighbors for over 1,000 miles in any direction. And, critically, it sits exactly 2,400 nautical miles from the Iranian capital. A B-2 has an unrefueled combat radius of roughly 3,500 nautical miles, with a single midair refueling from a KC-46 Pegasus tanker, That radius can extend to anywhere on Earth. From Diego Garcia, the B-2 can fly to Fordow, deliver its payload, and fly back to Diego Garcia without ever needing to refuel a second time. The fuel and air dynamics are not just convenient. They are the entire reason this base exists. The Pentagon has been positioning Diego Garcia as a strategic bomber forward operating base since 2001. Every B-2 strike that has ever happened against a hardened target in the Middle East has staged out of Diego Garcia. And the last time the United States quietly moved B-2s to Diego Garcia in this configuration was the spring of 2024. And within 30 days, the Houthi command and control infrastructure in Yemen was reduced to rubble. The Iranians watched that operation in real time. They know exactly what those 5 tail numbers parked on that ramp right now represent. The question is not whether they understand the message. The question is whether they have any meaningful response. Let's talk about the aircraft itself, because the B-2 Spirit is not just another bomber. It is a category of weapon system that has no peer anywhere on this planet and may never have a peer again. It is the only operational flying wing stealth bomber in the world. Its radar cross-section is roughly the size of a small bird. It can fly 6,900 miles without refueling. With refueling, it can fly anywhere on the globe and return. It cruises at 50,000 feet, well above the engagement envelope of every air defense system Iran fields. Its payload capacity is 40,000 pounds. It carries that payload internally in 2 side-by-side weapons bays, which is the only reason it can carry the bomb we are about to talk about. There is no other aircraft on Earth, not the B-1B Lancer, not the B-52 Stratofortress, not the F-15 Strike Eagle, not the F-22 Raptor, not the F-35 that can carry the GBU-57. Only the B-2. The Russian Tu-160 cannot carry it. The Chinese H-6 cannot carry it. The British and the French do not have anything close. The B-2 is the singular delivery platform for this singular weapon, and the United States has built exactly enough of them to make sure that no adversary on Earth can ever feel completely safe in a hardened underground facility. There are 19 in the fleet. 5 of them are now at Diego Garcia. That means roughly 1/4 of the entire global stealth penetration capability of the United States Air Force is currently parked within a single flight cycle of Iran. And the maintenance posture of these aircraft requires roughly 60 hours of maintenance for every flight hour, which means a B-2 deployment is not a routine event. It is a deliberate, calculated, expensive, sustained signal. The Air Force does not telegraph these movements lightly. The fact that we know they happened means somebody in the Pentagon wanted Tehran to know they happened. Stealth aircraft, by definition, are supposed to be invisible. The decision to allow them to be visible at Diego Garcia is itself the message. Now we get to the weapon. The GBU-57A/B Massive Ordnance Penetrator. 30,000 pounds of hardened steel and high explosive. 20.5 feet long, 31.5 inches in diameter. Built by Boeing under a Pentagon contract that began in the early 2000s for one specific reason. The United States had identified a problem that no existing weapon could solve. Adversary nations, including Iran and North Korea, were burying their most critical military and nuclear infrastructure deeper and deeper into hardened mountain facilities. The existing American bunker buster, the GBU-28, could penetrate roughly 20 feet of reinforced concrete. That was no longer enough, so Boeing built something else, something larger, heavier, faster, and with a casing made of high-performance Eglin steel, the same steel used in submarine pressure hulls, the same steel that can survive impact velocities that would shatter conventional steel into vapor. The GBU-57 was designed to fall from 50,000 feet, accelerate to terminal velocity, and bury itself into the earth before detonating. The depth specifications are still partially classified, but the unclassified figures put the penetration capability at roughly 200 feet through reinforced concrete and considerably more through rock or earth. Multiple weapons dropped on the same coordinates in sequence can effectively drill through almost any conceivable mountain. The fuse is programmable. The detonation can be delayed milliseconds or seconds, depending on the depth profile of the target. The payload is approximately 5'3" to 300 pounds of high explosive. When it detonates inside a buried facility, it does not destroy the facility through blast wave or thermal energy. It destroys the facility through overpressure, through the concussive shock wave that propagates through enclosed tunnels and chambers and pulverizes every piece of sensitive equipment inside. A centrifuge cascade does not need to be hit directly to be destroyed. It needs only to be shaken hard enough at the right frequency. And the GBU-57 is, in effect, the largest tuning fork ever manufactured. It is the only weapon in the American conventional arsenal explicitly designed to destroy a deeply buried nuclear enrichment facility without resorting to a nuclear weapon. There is, in the entire planet, exactly one place that this weapon was designed to be used against. That place is Fordow. Or, more properly, the Fordow Fuel Enrichment Plant. located approximately 20 miles northeast of the city of Qom in northern Iran, built into the side of Mount Alvand, a mountain that rises about 3,000 feet above the surrounding plain. The facility itself sits between 80 and 90 meters underground, that is roughly 260 to 295 feet, beneath a layer of solid rock that Iranian engineers spent years selecting specifically because they believed it was geologically impossible to penetrate. They were wrong. But that is what they believed when they built it. Fordow was constructed in secret beginning in 2006 and was not officially revealed to the world until 2009 when American, British, and French intelligence simultaneously announced its existence. The Iranians had been operating an undeclared enrichment facility for years, a direct violation of their obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The political shockwave from that revelation has never really subsided. Fordow is, in physical terms, a series of two main underground halls connected by access tunnels. Each hall is approximately the size of a football field. Inside those halls are roughly 3,000 IR-1 centrifuges and approximately 1,000 advanced IR-6 centrifuges, machines capable of enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels at a pace that has alarmed every Western intelligence service that watches Iran. According to the most recent International Atomic Energy Agency reports, Iran has stockpiled enough 60% enriched uranium at Fordow that, if further enriched to 90% weapons-grade, would be sufficient material for approximately 3 nuclear weapons. The enrichment from 60% to 90% is the trivial part. The hard part of building a bomb is going from natural uranium at 0.7% to highly enriched material. Once you cross 60%, you're already 90% of the way to a weapon by mass and by separative work units. Fordow is, by every credible analytical framework, the single most strategically valuable square meter of real estate on Iranian soil. Everything the Islamic Republic has ever done, every proxy war, every missile launch, every diplomatic posture, has been ultimately backstopped by the assumption that Fordow could never be touched. That assumption was the foundation of the entire Iranian deterrent. And 5 aircraft just landed at Diego Garcia, carrying the only weapon ever designed to invalidate that assumption. The natural question at this point is what Iran can do to defend Fordow against a B-2 strike. And the honest answer, the answer that Iranian military planners do not want to publicly acknowledge, is that there's essentially nothing they can do that has a meaningful probability of success. Let's walk through their inventory. Iran's primary long-range air defense system is the Russian S-300, specifically the S-300 PMU-2 variant. They received 4 battalions of these systems beginning in 2016. The S-300 is a capable system against 4th-generation aircraft. The B-2 is not a 4th-generation aircraft. The B-2 was designed in the 1980s specifically to defeat the previous generation of Soviet integrated air defense systems, and the S-300, while improved, is a direct evolutionary descendant of those exact systems. The B-2's radar cross-section is small enough that even an S-300 radar would not generate a usable track until the bomber was inside the engagement envelope, by which point the weapons would already be released. There is also the Iranian indigenous Bavar 373 system, which Iran claims is roughly equivalent to the S-300. Western intelligence assessments suggest it is somewhat less capable. There is the older Hawk system, which is essentially useless against modern stealth. There are the Sayad family of surface-to-air missiles, which are credible against fighters, but not against penetrating bombers operating above 50,000 feet. The Iranian Air Force itself consists of aging F-14 Tomcats, F-4 Phantoms, MiG-29s, and a handful of Su-22s, every single one of which is decades older than the threat they would be trying to intercept. Iran has, in recent years, attempted to procure the Russian Su-35 fighter, but only a small number have been delivered, and the Su-35, while a competent 4th-and-a-half-generation fighter, has no proven track record against 5th-generation stealth aircraft. There is no Iranian air defense system, indigenous or imported, that has ever been validated against a B-2 in a real or simulated engagement. The Iranians know this. The Russians, who would be the ones supplying the air defense systems, know this. The intelligence services of every NATO member state know this. The B-2 is, against the current Iranian air defense network, effectively unstoppable. And the GBU-57, once released from 50,000 feet, is unrecallable, unjammable, and undefeatable by any countermeasure currently in the Iranian inventory. The only meaningful defense Iran has against a strike on Fordow is the possibility that the United States chooses not to launch the strike. That is not a defense. That is a hope. If you are wondering whether the B-2 will actually be used, look at the historical record. The B-2 Spirit has been used in combat operations in every major American conflict since 1999. It struck targets in Serbia during Operation Allied Force. It struck targets in Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. It struck targets in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. It struck targets in Libya during Operation Odyssey Dawn in 2011. It struck targets in Syria, and it struck targets in Yemen as recently as 2024. The pattern is consistent. The B-2 is deployed when the target set requires hardened penetration, deep stealth, and zero tolerance for collateral damage. It is the surgical instrument of last resort, used only when conventional aircraft cannot do the job. The Libya strikes are particularly instructive. In 2011, 3 B-2s flew from Whiteman Air Force Base directly to Libya, struck Libyan air defense and hardened command and control sites, and returned to Missouri without ever landing. That was a 24-hour mission. The total time the aircraft were in Libyan airspace was measured in minutes. The damage they inflicted was strategic in scale. If the United States can fly 3 B-2s from Missouri to Libya and back in a single mission, the logistical question of striking Fordow from Diego Garcia is almost trivial. The aircraft are already in range. The crews are already on station. The maintenance teams are already deployed. The munitions are already loaded. Every operational element of a Fordow strike is, at this exact moment, in place. The only thing standing between the runway at Diego Garcia and the centrifuges at Fordow is a launch order. And launch orders in the American military are not difficult to produce when the political conditions justify them. Iranian intelligence is, at this exact moment, attempting to read the tea leaves. They are looking at satellite imagery of Diego Garcia. They are intercepting communications between Diego Garcia and U.S. Strategic Command. They are watching the maintenance posture of the aircraft. They are watching the fueling tempo. They are watching the munitions handling. And they are trying to determine, in real time, whether they are looking at a deterrent posture or a strike preparation. The difference between the two is measured in hours. A deterrent deployment sits on the ramp. A strike preparation begins fueling, begins arming, begins flight crew rotation cycles. Once those indicators start, the strike window opens, and once the aircraft are airborne, the strike window cannot be closed. There is no abort once the weapons release sequence is initiated. There is no recall once the GBU-57 is dropped. The next 72 hours will tell us, with high confidence, which posture the United States is actually in. The Iranian regime, in the meantime, has options. They can escalate by attempting a preemptive strike against Diego Garcia, using their Khorramshahr or Sejil ballistic missiles. Those missiles have the range, technically, but striking a fortified American military base would be an act of war that guarantees an overwhelming American response, including the strike they are trying to prevent. They can de-escalate by quietly opening back-channel negotiations through Oman, the same channel that produced the JCPOA in 2015. They can do nothing and hope that the deployment is a bluff. They cannot, however, defend Fordow. That option is no longer on the table. Step back for a moment from the immediate tactical picture and consider what this deployment means for the broader Middle East. Israel has been demanding a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities for over 15 years. Successive Israeli prime ministers, from Ehud Olmert to Benjamin Netanyahu, have privately pleaded with American presidents to either authorize an Israeli strike or to execute an American one. The American answer has consistently been no. The reason for that no has always been the same. Israel does not have the GBU-57 and does not have an aircraft capable of carrying it. Israeli F-15Is and F-35Is can carry American-supplied bunker busters, but nothing approaching the penetration capability of the MOP. Fordow has always been beyond Israeli reach. By moving B-2s to Diego Garcia, the United States has communicated to Israel that the conversation has changed. The strike, if it happens, will be an American operation. Israel will not be the one to do it. Israel will not need to do it. That single fact changes the entire regional dynamic. Saudi Arabia, watching all of this, is in a complicated position. The Saudis have spent the last decade quietly normalizing with Israel, and even more quietly preparing for a post-Iranian nuclear scenario. A successful strike on Fordow ends the Iranian nuclear program for, at minimum, the next half-decade. That is half a decade in which Saudi Arabia does not need to consider acquiring its own nuclear deterrent. Half a decade in which the Abraham Accords can deepen. Half a decade in which the regional security architecture pivots toward the Gulf Cooperation Council and away from Iranian dominance. The geopolitical implications of a single GBU-57 striking Fordow are, in their second-order effects, larger than the strike itself. So where does this leave us? The United States has, in the last 72 hours, executed the most precise and most consequential military signal in this entire standoff with Iran. They have not bombed anything yet. They have not even threatened to bomb anything publicly. They have simply moved 5 aircraft and a quantity of munitions to a remote atoll in the Indian Ocean and waited for Iranian intelligence to discover what was on those aircraft. That discovery has now occurred. The message has been received. The next move belongs to Tehran. And Tehran, for the first time in the entire arc of this confrontation, does not have a good move available. Every option carries unacceptable costs. Escalation invites annihilation. Capitulation invites domestic regime collapse. Inaction invites strategic obsolescence. The Islamic Republic was built on a single asymmetric promise, the promise that no matter how powerful the American military might be, there were certain things they could not touch. Fordow was the symbol of that promise. Fordow was the assurance that the regime, if it ever truly needed to, could build the ultimate weapon and survive any conventional response. That promise is now demonstrably untrue. And that fact is the single most destabilizing piece of information that Iranian regime stability has ever had to absorb. Whether the strike happens or not, the message has already done its work. Tehran now knows that the United States can, at any moment of its choosing, end the Iranian nuclear program with a single 8-hour flight from Diego Garcia. Everything that the regime does from this point forward, every diplomatic statement, every missile test, every proxy operation, will be conducted under the shadow of those 5 aircraft. And those 5 aircraft will not be leaving Diego Garcia anytime soon. This is, by any honest historical measure, one of the most significant strategic deployments of the 21st century. And it is happening in near complete silence, because that is how the B-2 was always designed to operate. The world will not know with certainty whether a strike was executed until the strike is over. There will be no warning. There will be no announcement. There will only be, at some point, either a satellite image of a damaged mountain in northern Iran, or there will be a quiet diplomatic statement from Oman confirming a new agreement. Either outcome is, at this point, more likely than the status quo continuing for another month. The next time you check the news, pay attention to 2 specific data points. First, the tail numbers visible on the ramp at Diego Garcia in commercial satellite imagery. If those numbers start disappearing, the strike is in progress. Second, the seismic monitoring stations around Qom, Iran. If those monitors register a sudden, large, shallow event, the strike has already happened. By the time the press conference at the Pentagon occurs, the centrifuges at Fordow will already have stopped spinning, and the geometry of the entire Middle East will have shifted into a configuration that the Islamic Republic of Iran was never structurally prepared to survive. If you want to understand what comes next, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and stay close. Because what happens in the next 72 hours is going to define the regional order for the next 20 years, and you are going to want to be watching when it happens.